About 18 months ago, I made a video about my top 10 favourite indie publishing houses based in the UK, but 10's not enough. There are so many great independent publishers based in the UK and elsewhere who are doing incredible things, pushing the boundaries of literature, publishing authors who otherwise wouldn't get a chance, promoting specific kinds of works, works from queer authors, works from specific countries around the world, works that are particularly punk, experimental, strange, outlandish. Indie publishing is the beating heart of the publishing world. So many of the great books that I read on a daily basis come from indie publishers, and we would be lost without them. Without the incredible works of independent publishers, the world of literature would be drab and boring. So, before I go on an angry rant about how important indie publishers are, let's run through 21 amazing independent publishing houses whose books you need to buy, whose authors you need to support and read. These people are the future of literature. They are the present of literature. They are everything to literature. Let's go. First up is one of my favourite publishing houses in the entire world, incredible, wonderful people who turned me on to the beauty and the majesty of Latin American fiction, Charco Press. Charco Press publish several books per year, written exclusively by Latin American authors, translated into English by amazing, incredibly talented translators, and I'm holding in my hand one of my favourite books of all time, published by Charco Press. This is The Adventures of China Iron by Gabriela Cabezon Camara. It was translated from Spanish by Fiona McIntosh and Iona McIntyre and published by Charco. This is an incredible historical novel, a wonderful sapphic dream of taking down patriarchy and laughing in the face of it. It's a beautiful thrill ride of a novel, and this and many other books by Charco made me realize how much I love Argentinian literature and Latin American literature in general. Charco Press are a small Edinburgh-based publisher, and they are changing the face of literature. They are showing English language readers the beauty of Latin American fiction, and I love them so much. Next is Cipher Press. Cipher Press are doing to queer fiction what Charco are doing to Latin American fiction in translation. Cipher Press find the most incredible, cutting-edge, imaginative, boundary-pushing authors and books and publish them. They exclusively publish books that are queer in any way, shape or form. These books can be experimental, they might be literary, they might be genre fiction. They've published horror, historical fiction, autofiction and more. And here's Nettleblack by Nat Reeve, an incredible non-binary writer of historical fiction. And this is an amazing book that they published, which I absolutely adored. A wonderful piece of British historical Victorian fiction that is positive and bright and funny and witty and charming in so many ways. I love this book to pieces. I have loved so much of what Cipher have published. They are the future of queer publishing. As a queer person, I have discovered so much self-love from Cipher. Reading their books has helped me understand myself better. I don't know where I'd be without Cipher Press. Jack and Alice, who run Cipher, are two of the kindest, most wonderful people in the whole wide world, and they have created something so important and so special with Cipher Press. Next, I want to talk about the magic of Pushkin Press. Pushkin are pretty big these days. They are still an indie publisher, but they have grown in all the best ways. Like the fact that they have a branch dedicated to murder mystery novels, and more specifically, murder mystery from around the world. That branch is called Pushkin Vertigo, and they have published some amazing Japanese honkaku murder mystery novels, as well as a lot of murder mysteries translated from other European languages. Pushkin are amazing. They have a focus on literature in translation from around the world, but they also publish some English language books as well. Named after Alexander Pushkin, this is an amazing publishing house that I've been working with for years. I have reviewed so many amazing books published by Pushkin, and they were the publisher that turned me on to honkaku Japanese murder mysteries in the first place. I absolutely love what they do. Pushkin Vertigo is such a cool imprint, and they keep being amazing. I also love their cover design, their web design, everything about their aesthetics is beautiful. 404 Inc. is a publishing house that I discovered relatively recently, maybe a year or two ago. They publish really, really great works, and they have this brilliant series called Inklings, which are these tiny little, almost pamphlet-style books on specific topics. They are essays, maybe 30, 40 pages long, on a specific topic. My partner recently read an inkling about Dungeons and Dragons. I read one about the TV show Schitt's Creek. The Inklings are awesome, but they also publish larger books. This is The Arena of the Unwell by a trans man named Liam Connerman. Liam's a really, really cool guy, and they took a chance on him. They published one of his Inklings, and then they published this full-length debut novel of his. 404 are amazing. Tilted Axis Press was founded by Korean to English translator Deborah Smith, who I once got to have dinner with in Berlin, and she's amazing. And I honestly don't know where I would be in terms of my career without Tilted Axis Press. I honestly don't know if Books and Bow would exist without the influence and inspiration that Tilted Axis Press has offered. Tilted Axis is an amazing, radical, independent publisher that focus exclusively on works in translation from around the world. They've published books from India, Korea, Japan, Thailand, Indonesia, and more. They're often up for awards, they often win those awards, and Tilted Axis are absolutely remarkable. They find and translate and publish some of the best works from all around the world, and I don't know where any of us would be without the work of Tilted Axis Press. A publishing house that means just as much to me as Tilted Axis is Honford Star. Books and Bow started when we lived in Seoul, and while we were there, we met this guy who had just started a publishing house. He gave us books to review, we reviewed them, and it was kind of like a symbiotic relationship where we were helping each other grow. Since then, Honford Star have grown immeasurably, publishing some of the biggest works out of Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and more. Everyone knows Cursed Bunny. This book is massive. A Korean short story collection written by Bora Chung and translated by Anton He, the big name in Korean to English translation right now. Anton is a legend and a very good friend of mine. And I've gotten to make friends with these people, these publishers, these translators, these authors, thanks to the amazing work of Honford Star and others like Tilted Axis Press. Honford Star are amazing. If you love experimental and strange Korean, Japanese, Taiwanese literature, read the books that Honford Star are putting out. I try my best to read and review every single thing they ever publish. I don't know where I'd be without them. This is a book by Cipher Press. They are a small UK-based indie publishing house that has a really cool series. The series is called Reading the City, or A City in Short Fiction, and they take cities from all around the world. They find authors based in those cities to write short stories. They have those short stories translated by amazing translators, and they bind them together in a single book. This is the Book of Beijing. 10 authors writing 10 short stories about Beijing. They are all Chinese, Beijing-based authors. Their stories have all been translated by different translators and published by Cipher. What an amazing idea. You want to get to know a city? Read its writers, read its art, and Cipher are allowing us to travel the world through this series of books. It's such a cool idea. I've been reading these books for 2 or 3 years now, reviewing them and talking about them whenever possible, and at the time of recording, the Book of Beijing is their newest book. Then we have Europa Editions. Europa are actually based in the US, Italy, and the UK, and depending on which branch of Europa, they own the rights to different books when it comes to publication. So for example, the works of Mieko Kawakami are published in the UK by Picador, but in the US they're published by Europa. But Europa UK have published other amazing works in translation from all around the world. So check out Europa. Wherever you're based, whether it's the US, the UK, or somewhere in the EU, you should be able to find some really unique translated works from other parts of the world. Then there's Lolli Editions. Lolli is a publishing house that I only discovered relatively recently, and they put out some incredible works by Scandinavian authors translated into English. I think they actually have a broader focus on Europe in general, but it's their Scandinavian works that really wow me and often get them all of their attention and their awards, etc. Like, for example, the works of Olga Raven. Her short, strange, experimental sci-fi novel, The Employees, which was translated by Martin Aitken, absolutely blew me away. An amazing work of fiction. And then there's Strega, which I read just recently. This is an amazing Swedish novel, an incredibly dark and bleak piece of gothic fiction, translated from Swedish by Saskia Vogel, and oh my god, wow, an amazing feminist, gothic, dark, strange, experimental, trippy piece of fiction. Lolli are publishing amazing stuff, and their covers and their book design is also gorgeous. Dead Ink is a publisher that doesn't do anything too specific. They publish pretty broad stuff, mostly works in English, I believe. At least everything I can think of was written in English, but they focus on authors who otherwise wouldn't get a chance. They publish books of all different genres and types, and The Hierarchies by Ros Anderson is an amazing piece of science fiction about a sex robot. I've talked about this book before, I've done a review of it, I love this novel, I love everything Dead Ink do, and they even now own their own bookshop. They opened a bookshop in Liverpool not long ago, it's doing really well. If you're in Liverpool or you ever visit the city, go check out their bookshop. They are now a publishing house and a bookshop, and that's awesome. An indie publishing house I've talked about a few times and whose name I still cannot pronounce is Peirene, Peirene, I don't know. Here's the name. Tell me how to pronounce it, please. They're a small independent press that focus on European works in translation, but with a small caveat that I really like. The books have to be around 200 pages or less. I love that because I absolutely adore short fiction, so everything you read published by them will be 200 or fewer pages, and that's great. They publish amazing stuff from all across Europe. I've read some amazing Norwegian, Italian, Latvian books by them. They're awesome. Paradise Rot by Jenny Haval, who is also a very, very successful musician, is one of my favorite novels of all time, and this was published by Verso. Verso are a pretty broad independent publisher. They also published this, one of my favorite non-fiction books of all time, Bad Gays, A Homosexual History. So right here you've got a work in translation and a queer non-fiction. Verso do not hold back. They publish amazing things over and over and over again. If you see Verso on the spine of a book, pick it up. It's going to be great. Much like Dead Ink,
Influx Press
are an independent UK-based publishing house that just focus on incredible stuff that has been passed over by bigger publishers, and their big name author right now is Percival Everett. Everett is a big name in the US. He's an incredible Black American writer who has not had a chance in the UK. For some reason, he just hasn't found much success here. And Influx Press have managed to completely turn that around, which I think is phenomenal. They have made him a huge success in the UK, and they've been publishing amazing works for several years now. And they've also teamed up with Dead Ink on a few projects. They are so great at what they do. Fitzcarraldo Editions is a publishing house that needs no introduction. They are absolute legends. In some ways, they are the kings and queens of the indie publishing world. And while there are things about them I don't like, mostly their cover design, they have this uniform appearance where their fiction is blue and their non-fiction is white, and it always just looks like this. I don't love it. A lot of people don't love it. And I also absolutely hate the fact that they never ever put the name of their translator on the front of their books like every other great indie publisher does. Aside from all of that, which is really, really annoying, they are an incredible independent publisher. They're one of those publishers where you see one of their books on a shelf in a bookshop, in a library, you've not read it before, just read it, it'll be amazing. Their ability to pick and find and translate and publish some of the greatest works in literature across the world are remarkable. It's amazing how good they are at talent scouting, finding the best literary works of fiction and non-fiction from right across the globe over and over again. Nobel Prize winner Olga Tokarczuk, legendary French memoirist Annie Ernaux. These authors are so beloved by so many people, and it's thanks to Fitzcarraldo Editions that we get to read them in English translation. So I am very much indebted to them. They're incredible. But they really need to start naming the translator. And Other Stories is a clothing shop, but it's also an independent publisher that just happens to have the same name. And honestly, and other stories makes a lot more sense for the name of a publisher than some clothes, but what are you gonna do? I confess I haven't read that many books by them, but I have read this, Boulder. This is a Catalan novel by Eva Baltazar, translated by Julia Sanchez. I did a video on this a little while ago. This is an amazing book, a fantastic sapphic piece of fiction set primarily in Iceland, and it's strange and angry, full of unlikable people. It's really, really dark and beautiful, and I loved it. And from here, I'm going to start reading a lot more books that and other stories put out. A wonderful publisher that I want to give a big shout out to is Guts. Guts are a small UK-based team who focus primarily on memoirs. They have put out some amazing books. Their whole thing is being punk and radical, telling the stories of people who most of society might not be interested in hearing from. Memoirs of about mental struggle or homelessness, being a sex worker, important working class stories that should be told and people should read. And that's what Guts publish, and I think they're incredible for doing so. At this point, Granta are pretty massive. They are publishing some incredible books, especially works in translation, like the books of Sayaka Murata. But Granta is also a magazine, maybe one of the most successful literary magazines, at least in the UK. Granta magazine is a very, very big deal. Getting a short story or an essay published in Granta is massive, and they also publish some amazing books. They publish my favorite Japanese author, Sayaka Murata, so where would I be without them? Also, their cover design is always on point. But like Fitzcarraldo, they are not very good at putting the name of the translator on the cover, and that irritates me. There she is, on the back. Right at the bottom, put her there. Anyway, Granta are great, but I'm allowed to have nitpicks. As a massive lover of horror and the Gothic, I was so happy to relatively recently discover Haunt, an Edinburgh-based publishing house that publish amazing works of Gothic and horror fiction. They've published a queer horror anthology, a book of Heather Parry's short stories, a book of Scottish folk horror, and this really, really good novel that I talked about recently. The Gingerbread Men by Joanna Corrance is a dark and twisted fairy tale set in the Scottish Highlands. This and many other incredible books, whether they be anthologies, short story collections, or novels, are all fantastic. Everything I've read so far published by Haunt has been brilliant. So if you're a fan of the Gothic and horror fiction, definitely check out what Haunt is putting out. They are an amazing publishing house. And then we have Gallic. Gallic are absolutely wonderful. Much like Fitzcarraldo and a few of the other publishers I've mentioned here, Gallic have a knack for finding and publishing the best authors around today. And what I'm holding right here is one of my probably top 5 favourite novels ever, Little by Edward Carey. They have published almost everything that he's written. They've also published several of my other favourite authors. They are so good at publishing mystery stories, Gothic stories, and far more beyond that. I am so amazed by Gallic. Their design work, their promotion, their ability to find and publish only the best works by the best authors writing right now. It's incredible. And Edward Carey is proof of that. Little is one of my favourite books, and without Gallic, we wouldn't have it. Based in Norwich, we have Galley Beggar Press, a publishing house I've talked about a lot in the past. Galley Beggar published one of the coolest pieces of fantasy fiction we've had for years, Mordu by Alex Feby. An incredible, very strange, Lovecraftian, twisted, Victorian-inspired, bleak fantasy thing. I loved Mordu. It was a twisted, gnarled, dark piece of proper grimdark fantasy. And they also published Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Ellmann, which was a book that everyone was talking about for a long, long time when it first came out in 2019, I think. An enormous 1,000-page book that's just a handful of sentences long. Everyone was reading that book. I read it. I didn't finish it, but I loved what I read. Galley Beggar are really, really cool people. And finally, I want to mention Profile. Profile is a pretty large independent publisher with several different imprints. So they're probably the largest publisher that I'm talking about on this list, but they are still independent. If you're based in the UK, You've probably heard of Serpent's Tail or Viper, and Viper bring you the works of Katrina Ward, one of my favourite authors. And I mean, I've talked about this book quite a lot. The Last House on Needless Street is one of the best thrillers ever written. After that, we had Sundial and Looking Glass Sound, and Katrina Ward continues to impress. I got to meet her recently. She is the loveliest, sweetest person in the world, and Viper are putting out her books. They put out a lot of amazing thrillers, crime novels, and murder mysteries, all of which overlap in a lot of different ways, but that's their specialty. So here you're getting a 2-for-1. Everything that Serpent's Tail and Viper publish is all owned by Profile, and it's all really, really great stuff, especially the works of Katrina Ward. There you go. 21 amazing independent publishing houses, mostly based in the UK. I really hope you enjoyed. This was quite a quick rundown, and there are still indie publishing houses that I missed out. There always are. There's always more. There are ones I don't know, ones I've forgotten, ones I overlooked, and I apologise for that, but I could talk forever about indie publishing houses. They prop up the world when it comes to publishing. They are its heart. And I will go on championing and promoting the incredible authors and books that come from indie publishing houses for as long as I live. I can't put into words how important they are to me, to us, to publishing. So check all of these out if you can, and subscribe for books.